Guys, why did the Scarecrow win an award? Because he was outstanding in his field. What? You've already heard that one?
Stupid! I knew I should have gotten my jokes from puns.com.
Hi everybody, my name's King Newsme. I decided to dedicate the month of November's to scarecrows. So I decided to talk about a few scarecrow-based episodes from your favorite shows. Because I feel like scarecrows are some of the scariest creatures in horror media and they don't get used enough. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Are You Afraid of the Dark episode, The Tale of the Silent Servant, which is the last of 3 scarecrow episodes that I wanted to talk about. So if you enjoy this video, make sure you check out my other 2 videos, The Scarecrow Walks at Midnight from Goosebumps and The Companion from Creepshow. And for those of you guys that don't know, Are You Afraid of the Dark is a children's anthology horror show that aired on Nickelodeon from 1992 to 2000. It follows a group of kids called the Midnight Society as they sit around a campfire and tell scary stories, and we watch the stories that they tell. It has 7 seasons of spooky stories and some really legendary characters for horror media. It was revived in 2019 and now tells seasonal based stories like American Horror Story rather than episodic horror stories like it did in the 90s. And today we're going to take a look at the 7th episode of the 4th season, The Tale of the Silent Servant. This episode really isn't talked about very much, even though it's one of the better written stories in my opinion. It also has a pretty good message for kids, so I think it's kind of underrated. But I can get more into why I think that later in the video, so let's quit yapping and get into it. We start this episode with the Midnight Society, of course, and Kiki and Frank are mad at Betty Ann because she didn't want to sneak into a movie and get in trouble. After the movie they watched was over, they tried sneaking into another theater because the door was open and they were just right there. And they almost successfully got into it, but Betty Ann decided to yell,
"Hey guys, this way out!"
and got them kicked out. And while they're complaining about this, Betty Ann takes this moment to say a monologue about doing the right thing rather than staying silent.
Silence is power.
She says science is the power of the unknown, and it could be a blessing or truly evil. Now throw the probably toxic chemicals powdered creamer into the fire and let's begin. We start the story with a farmer who finds a man sleeping in his barn holding some sort of talisman. The farmer's name is Mr. Earlstead and he yanks the talisman out of the man's hand and scaredly says,
"What have you done?"
The man, who they call Crazy George, claims that something attacked him and that it's still nearby. And the show immediately proves his point because the door behind Mr. Earlstead is slowly creaking open. Crazy George spouts some gibberish to the man before running away in a panic. It is then revealed that Mr. Earlstead actually has control over the beast and that it must do exactly everything he says. He's angry at the beast for revealing itself to another person, so he locks the beast in a barn and tells him that he'll be back very soon.
After I take care of our friend George.
Uh-oh. Rest in peace, Crazy George. I will remember you. Cut to 20 years in the future, and we finally get to meet our main characters, Jared and his cousin, Anne. They're playing catch outside when Jared gets a bit too confident and tells Anne to go long. He then chucks the baseball through the window. Kid does have quite an arm though, I gotta say. And then Jared immediately throws Anne under the bus about the broken window.
Told her not to go back so far.
This obviously angers his Uncle Pete, who tells the kids that they're gonna have to work off the price of the window. And they're not allowed to play baseball until they do so. But their first task is a very simple one. They just have to deliver some beans to a neighbor that's down the road. That should be super easy. And the next day they're gonna have to help build a fence around a garden to keep some deer out.
This isn't fair.
Breaking my window wasn't fair.
On the way to deliver the beans, Jared spots Mr. Earlstead's old barn and his gravestone. Yikes. And tells Jared that there is a myth that Mr. Earlstead was actually a sorcerer and that he had invisible servants take care of his farm for him.
And you believe that stuff?
And what if I do, Jared? What then? Jared is a bit curious to see what's inside the barn, and of course it's just decrepit and rotting. But he does find some spare wood that he could use to make a dugout in his baseball field. So naturally, the kids just start ripping the barn to shreds. Little do they know, somebody is waiting on them to release him. Oh no. Wait, was he in there for 20 years? Oh my god, he must have been so lonely. Jared then has a genius plan to put the scarecrow in the garden to scare the animals away. But Anne claps back with,
Scarecrow scare crows, not deer.
she does have a point there. But she goes with his plan and she helps him take the scarecrow back home. And as they lift it up, she finds the strange talisman that Crazy George had earlier. And it looks like the symbol that's on Mr. Earlstead's gravestone. But of course the kids don't think anything about the weird talisman and they just take the scarecrow home. They set it up and it is very creepy, honestly. It's a very simple design, but it almost looks like it's human. It's just missing eyes and a nose. It's very Uncanny Valley-esque and definitely nightmare fuel. Anne's big brother Mark comes to check on the kids and sadly informs them that even though they got a scarecrow, they still have to build a fence. And they also inform him that they forgot to give the neighbor his beans. How hard is it to deliver beans, man? So the kids rush back to the old barn to get the beans that they left behind, but they're not alone.
Good death comes to those who wait.
Looks like Crazy George is still alive, thank God. And he's kind of panicking because the talisman is missing. The kids tell him that they haven't seen any dragons, which is a lie. And Crazy George starts going, well, crazy. And he tells the kids in a very confusing way that Mr. Earlstead raised the servants, and only he is the one to stop the terror.
But he's dead. Yet, the servant walks.
He warns the kids that once the magic spell has been said, it can't be undone, and that the servants are always listening.
Galovector, solemnus. The servant will hear it nevermore.
Why'd you say the magic words? You crazy? Oh, wait. This understandably freaks out the kids, so they make their escape while he laughs maniacally because he knows what damage is about to be done. The kids run all the way back home with the beans. Come on, man. They also rediscovered that they actually did have the dragon talisman all along. Jared opens up the talisman to find that there's a hidden scroll inside with the forbidden incantation written on it. So obviously he reads it out loud, cause that's smart, which makes Jared the new master of the scarecrow. Later that night, the kids are taking out the trash when they hear a strange noise behind them, and they turn around to see something terrifying. The scarecrow is now somehow directly behind them. They sprint to Mark and they try to explain to him everything that has happened, but they're talking too fast and too panicky, so he just tells them to show him what they're talking about. So they take him to where the scarecrow was standing, and it's now gone. But Mike finds it about 20 feet away, lying next to the trash cans. Hey, that's me after a good night with the boys. What am I kidding? I don't leave my house. Mark tries to find a rational explanation for why the scarecrow is now laying next to the trash cans. And he even offers to help them set it back up in the garden, but they turn that offer down. And Jared once again blames Anne for the situation that they have found themselves in.
You never should have broke that window. You're the one who threw the ball. You should have caught it.
He seriously thinks that her not catching a ball that he threw 20 feet over her head is her fault, and is also the reason a scarecrow is alive, because she's definitely the one that read the paper. So Jared angrily tells the scarecrow that it should be the one to fix the window because it's supposed to be his servant, and while it's at it, might as well deliver the beans. Please, scarecrow, deliver those beans. Please, I'm begging you, somebody needs to do it. And after his little fit, the kids just go off to bed. And the next day when the kids wake up, the window is fixed, and the neighbor got his beans. Finally! But they still have to help build a fence around the garden. And they get pretty far in the process, but Mark has a game that he has to get to, so they're gonna have to finish it the next day. Which lazy Jared doesn't want to have to do. After Mark leaves, Anne confesses to Jared that she thinks the scarecrow was the one to fix the window and deliver the beans. Because there is no way Mark would have had that much pity to both fix the window and deliver the beans for the kids. And there is simply no other way it could have happened. But Jared doesn't believe her, and to prove her wrong, he commands the scarecrow to finish the fence for them. But the scarecrow gives Anne the creeps, so she asks Jared to take the command back because they both heard what Crazy George said.
George is crazy. What's your excuse?
Damn, he got you there. Gosh, sheesh, you have to go that hard on her. And that night, Anne reads up on the scroll just in case she has to put matters into her own hands. And the next day when the kids wake up, Mark is impressed on how quickly they finished the fence, which they obviously had no idea was finished. But since they got all their work done, they get the afternoon off. And this has Jared super stoked. Now he has a servant that'll do anything he tells it to. So he tells it to build him a dugout for his baseball field. But like I said, Anne did her research on the servant the night before.
Calavector Solemnos, cancel the command.
And she tries her best to make Jared stop while he's ahead. And the kids head off to town because they got the day off, but when they get back,
I told you, this is great.
the servant has finished the dugout for Jared, but he used the boards from the fence to build it. Yikes. Mark is understandably pissed because the fence is now ruined, and the kids try to explain to him that the scarecrow was the one that tore it down. But Mark is tired of hearing the kids out, and he tells them that they need to find a better excuse for Uncle Pete. And he grounds the two for being menaces. But he does give them their gloves back, so at least they can go play catch. That night, Jared discovers that Mark accidentally gave them the wrong bag and didn't actually give them their gloves back. But Jared, being Jared, thinks somebody stole his baseball glove, and he's not too happy about that.
I'd like to kill whoever did.
Ah, shit. Luckily, he immediately regrets saying this, but it's already too late. The Scarecrow is off to kill Mike because he stole his glove. They quickly try to break the talisman to stop the Scarecrow, but only the true master can separate the dragons and stop him. So Jared tries to smash it, but he's about as strong as SpongeBob lifting up his stuffed animals. But luckily, it's after Mark's baseball game, and Anne knows exactly where they hang out. Of course it's a cornfield, you rednecks. And as the kids are racing to Mark, the Scarecrow is creeping in on him. Like, literally creeping. The dude moves so slow. But luckily, the kids make it to Mark first, and they warn him about the Scarecrow. But Mark claims that he doesn't have Jared's glove. He must have left it on another bag that's on the tractor, which their Uncle Pete is currently driving. As the Scarecrow watches him, very close by. This is when something mysterious happens and the tractor breaks down in the field. And this is when Uncle Pete too discovers the bags have been swapped. And he's not too happy about that. Well, he's about to be dead, so Jared tries to tell Anne that they need to go save his uncle, but Anne finally steps up to him and tells him, no, we're gonna do things my way this time. Mark and the kids hop in his truck and Mark rushes the kids to Mr. Earlstead's grave as the Scarecrow just creeps closer and closer to Pete. Luckily, they break the dragons just before the servant hurts Pete. And Anne says the spell to put the servant back to sleep.
Calibector Selena, go back where you came from!
Defeating him for good. Well, hopefully. Damn it. And that's the end of the story, but we fade back into the Midnight Society, where they end the meeting for the night, and Frank and Kiki apologize to Betty Ann by offering to take her to another movie and pay for her ticket.
Except I picked the flick.
Very wholesome. And that's the end of the episode. I personally think this episode is very underrated. No, it doesn't have the scariest scenes ever. It doesn't even break the top 20 scariest episodes. But I think the storytelling in this episode is top tier, and compared to all the other episodes of Are You Afraid of the Dark, the acting really isn't that bad. Not bad at all. And most of the characters are really lovable. Uncle Pete, for example, never gets overly upset with the kids, even after they break his window. He stays calm and cool with them, and he gives them a pretty fair punishment, in my opinion. Also, Pete was played by Brian Dooley, who was actually in the very first episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark, The Tale of the Phantom Cab, as the cab driver, which is pretty awesome if you ask me. Anne's big brother Mark was also a very lovable guy. He was always willing to hear the kids out on their wild explanations, and he never made them feel dumb or crazy for thinking the Scarecrow was alive. His reaction at the end when he realized that they weren't lying is pretty funny though.
What the blazes?
Mark is played by Tyler Labine, who actually has had a pretty successful career outside of Are You Afraid of the Dark. He's in a bunch of really good movies, but you probably know him best as Dale from Tucker and Dale vs. Evil. I'm also glad that Jared had his comeuppance. He was way too cocky the whole episode. He was willing to throw Anne under the bus at any moment just so he could make himself look better and push the blame off of him. He even blatantly doesn't listen to Anne when she tries to warn him multiple times of the dangers that the servant will bring. Needless to say, I'm glad Anne grew the balls to tell him no. That made me so happy. Crazy George was also an interesting insert for the episode. We honestly didn't really need him if you think about it. Sure, the scene where he scares the kids by being absolutely insane does add an extra scary scene which this episode lacks. But just 2 minutes later, Jared reads the scroll again, which tells us the same information, so we really didn't need to have that scene in there. We also didn't need to see him grab the talisman and put it back together at the very end of the episode, although it does add an extra horror element of the servant coming back one day. I'm just saying, he kind of was a little unnecessary, if you ask me. I mean, he was important for the backstory, but they could have just killed Crazy George off as well. What can I say? Crazy George is played by Sam Malkin, and he was actually Scratch in the Goosebumps episode, The Tale of the Barking Ghost. What the fuck? And he was actually Scratch in the Goosebumps episode, The Barking Ghost. Speaking of Goosebumps, this episode brings back the magic element to explain why the Scarecrow is alive, just like Goosebumps did in The Scarecrow Walks at Midnight. And both this episode and the book were released just months apart, so it's kind of just a strange coincidence that they had similar ideas around the same time. Because Lord knows, writing for an episode of a TV show takes a while, just like writing a book takes a while. Now let's talk about the Scarecrow. The Scarecrow had the potential to be one of the scariest creatures in all of Are You Afraid of the Dark? The realistic face, the pits for eyes, the eerie vibes that just radiate off of him. He moves slow but fast at the same time, and in the wrong hands, he could easily take over the world. But sadly, all we get to see him do is build a fence and walk a little bit. I just feel like there was a ton of wasted potential for this guy. There's really no threat to the main characters of the episode, which I feel like is where they messed up. They could have made Jared a bit more power hungry and made him feel like he's invincible because he has a servant that'll literally do anything for him. It isn't until he accidentally gives the wrong command and has the Scarecrow turn on him and start coming after him, rather than the Scarecrow pursuing Uncle Pete, who has probably less than a minute of screen time in the episode. But like I said, the servant is actually a pretty creepy guy, and the moments where he is moving around on his own and stuff are actually pretty scary. I just wish they utilized him more, been a little bit more creative with him. But let me know what you think about this episode in the comments below. I have a Patreon. The $5 members get bonus content, plus videos a day early, maybe some pictures of my cats, and a Discord server, also your name right here on screen. Like the video if you liked the video. Thank you for watching the video all the way through. I appreciate you all, and peace.